Okay. Good evening. I'd like to call the Mill Creek Planning Commission meeting to order. It is April 17th and it's about 6 o'clock at night. So I don't have the agenda in front of me. Can we start with a roll call, please? I think that's what's first on the agenda.
Chair Nolan, Vice Chair Hamilton,
Present.
Commissioner Abrams, Commissioner Barunda,
Present.
Commissioner Briles,
Here.
Commissioner Geiger,
Here.
Commissioner Schulte.
Here.
Could you pop the agenda up on the screen? Okay, thank you. So the meeting minutes of our March 20th meeting were sent out to the commission ahead of time electronically. I hope people had a chance to review them. Would there be any changes or corrections or deletions? Or do we want to have a motion to go ahead and approve the minutes of our March 20th, 25 meeting?
Motion to approve the minutes.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion that's moved and seconded to approve the meetings of our March 20th meeting. Is there any discussion? Okay, so seeing no discussion, we'll go ahead and vote on it. Those in favor of the March 20th meeting minutes being approved signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. And Matt isn't online, is he, by chance? No, okay, good. Okay, now we'll go into the briefing discussion portion of our meeting. We have a resolution recommending adoption of the 2025 housing regulations update. And so we have three pieces of that. There's the Planning Commission resolution, which has been drafted for us to look at. There's the Exhibit A, which is a staff report. And then we have a motion written by staff for us to act on. So. Oh, okay, yes. Okay, thank you. I see we have a public hearing on the 25 housing regulations update. And so is there anybody in the public that wants to testify before the Mill Creek Planning Commission before we move on to briefing and discussion? And seeing nobody online and we have nobody in the audience here, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of our meeting. Thanks, Matt. So then we can go ahead and move on with the resolution, I guess. That's what we'll start with.
All right, Vice Chair Hamilton, if you don't mind, I've got a little short presentation to give to you guys before you to take action on the resolution. So agenda of this presentation is to just a quick recap of the middle housing. Since there are no one here for the public hearing, I'll go through it very quickly. Some quick updates on changes that have happened since the last meeting, then any questions and staff recommendation. So what is middle housing? We've been over this several times. I'm just gonna skip through these ones. I will touch on some legislation that we didn't cover in depth previously, especially HB 1042, which was about the use of existing buildings for residential purposes. HB 1042, we're required to adopt it by the same deadlines of their housing, and we added on. It doesn't have a large impact on Mill Creek because we don't have a lot of existing commercial buildings there that would be suitable for residential conversion. So we added it on to this this set of amendments just to, as another housing piece to push through. Skip through again. HB 1042 requires that allowed densities be increased by 50% for housing added to existing buildings and limits parking for those new units that are added. So this would mainly apply to areas particularly in town center and the community business zones. It's especially not going to impact town center because town center does not have a density cap. So the 50% bonus doesn't really mean anything. It would really only impact the community business zone. All right. And again, just for anyone who's tuning in, the requirements, the amendments we're talking about apply in certain areas. The minimum allowed density applies citywide. The ADU regulations apply in the neighborhood residential MDR zones. And unit lot subdivision applies everywhere middle housing is allowed. And HOAs were able to opt out if they did so before July 23rd, 2023. And the state does not track or enforce HOA regulations. So we don't have a list of all the HOAs that did opt out. All right, and so the meat of the presentation is these new updates since the last meeting. Title 4, no updates. Title 14, which is the definitions and administration section, there were some definitions that were defined. Some new definitions are now defined by reference to the definition in the RCW. That was done at the request of the City Council. And we removed ADUs from the definition of middle housing as requested by Planning Commission. Title 16 had no major updates. There was one small update. I added ADUs, the list of housing types that are allowed to do unit lot subdivision because we removed them from this middle housing. Title 17, there were some changes. In Chapter 12 and Chapter 15, which are the MDR and mixed-use high-density zone chapters, we added boarding houses, which is required by HB 1042. In Chapter 22, we added an exception to the density calculation, which gives a 50% bonus to residential density when converting existing commercial buildings to residential. In Chapter 27, we clarified that distances are measured in walking distances and not as the crow flies. And in Chapter 27, we eliminated parking requirements from new housing units that are added during commercial building conversions. And I did not add it here. We also made the change to the density calculation we discussed the last Planning Commission meeting where the Planning Commission opted to go with the option 1 option. So we implemented that as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the boarding houses addition,
Mhm.
is there any exemptions or exclusions on that similar to the ADU? Or if an HOA disallows them, are they in conflict with state or city ordinances? If someone wanted to propose one and they weren't allowed to based on HOA covenants, how does that work?
Yeah, good
as
question.
far as
There
the
isn't an
precedence?
opt-out. There wasn't an opt-out section, but I believe HB 1042 did not preempt HOAs. Let me just confirm that real fast. HB 1042. All right. Just one moment.
Was there a definition of boarding houses added?
They
Or we
they added
referenced
a definition
RCW?
for co-living housing.
Okay, co-living, yeah.
And they said that the cities, in the definition, it said cities may have other terms such as boarding house or rooming house and other terms
Okay.
like that.
And then is there stuff about residency requirements that distinguishes it from things like Airbnb and short-term uses?
It doesn't have anything about the length of stay. It just has to do with the form. Here, let me pull up the definition they gave. Oh, sorry, I'm on the, I'm looking at the wrong one. It's, HB 1998 that did that, not 1042. That's why I'm not finding it. Okay. Okay, so the definition for co-living housing is sleeping units that are independently rented and lockable and provide living and sleeping space, and residents share kitchen facilities with, do you want me to put this on the board instead of?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me do that real fast. All right, so here's the definition of the co-living housing. So it's residential development that with sleeping units that are independently rented and lockable, provide living and sleeping space, and residents share kitchen facilities with other sleeping units in the building. Local governments may use other names referred to co-living housing, including but not limited to congregate living facilities, single room occupancy, rooming house, boarding house, lodging house, and residential suites. Some cities that implemented this chose to rename their boarding house, all their references boarding house with co-living housing, but you're not required to.
Do we have anywhere else in our codes that would distinguish on whether or not things like Airbnb are defined separately such that someone couldn't say, I'm creating a co-living housing and basically do it as a rental for short-term rentals, acting more like a hotel motel type thing?
We don't have, so we define short-term rentals in our code. However, we don't really provide any prohibitions against short-term rentals anywhere. So if someone wanted to, say, do boarding house, they could, but they could also just run their house as an Airbnb anyways without really any real, it's kind of.
Yeah, and so this
we
is
don't
where the
really regulate
preemption
short-term
comes
rentals.
in on with the HOAs, because some of the HOAs in our area have their covenants or bylaws, whatever, say that they don't want the Airbnbs basically. And if this one says, I'm preempting that covenant ban or disallowance from the HOAs, that'd be important to know in doing this, just as a information.
Yeah, I'll need to follow up with some guidance from Commerce, but reading through the bill now, there are no references to HOAs. So I would assume that HOAs are not prohibited from banning these housing forms.
Okay, and then if the city chose to take a stance on Airbnbs, would this language cause problems down the road, or it would just be modified down the road?
I think it would probably depend on the length of the lease. I mean, the difference between a short-term rental and a long-term rental is the time, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I think it would have to be a judgment call probably as it comes. If there's what could be considered a boarding house that's offering rooms for 30 days or less, then that probably would be a short-term rental. But if it's a same kind of structure that's providing, a
Yeah, so
6 month
currently
to a year-long
we're
lease,
silent on a definition like that.
it's,
And so I just wanted to be clear if we're intentionally leaving that for another day on the silence, or it can be interpreted by lack of specification, any rental that meets definition of having a shared kitchen or whatever, and units would
Yeah.
qualify.
these are great questions, Commissioner. And unfortunately, the answer to this is a little bit of a punt in that short-term rentals is something that City Council has also kind of had a study session on and discussing. And it's a little bit of a wicked problem where, it's a poorly defined thing and there's also potentially lost revenue associated with by lack of taxing of said Airbnbs, but we also don't even know how many short-term rentals technically even operate in the city. So, but the answer to that question is it's something that we're in the process of collecting information on to determine just how big of a problem short-term rentals even are in the city, and whether or not how we regulate that is going to maybe flow from, is it 2 or 3 properties in the city that are existing versus if it's a substantial problem, then we might need to regulate them differently.
And then, so if we were to vote to just go through these, because we have that June, is this part of the ones we have to have done by the June timeframe or whatever for our GMA?
Let me double check. One of them is not required till December.
Okay. If we were to approve it because we have that June deadline that we want to hit, is there anything prohibiting us or making it unduly complicated if we wanted to amend it due to short-term rentals decisions we may enact later on?
So
That gets
just-
us in a hairy mess.
So just to make sure I understand, so the concern is by allowing, which we already allow boarding houses, correct?
Yes,
Justin?
we're,
And so the
yeah.
change that's being contemplated in this bill is, can you refresh my memory?
well, we're allowing them in additional zone that didn't allow them already, which is the MDR and MUHDR zones, but they're already allowed in the NR zone, which covers most of the city.
Okay, so the concern would be taking a 3-bedroom apartment and then individually subletting each individual room, and then in turn, turning that into an Airbnb, correct? As I understand the code now, that's already allowed under short-term rentals.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're just expanding where that could happen with this.
it can already happen right now as a short-term rental. Oddly enough, I just believe
Okay.
what the current code says is you can only do it as an Airbnb right now, but with this change, it'll allow you to do long-term leases as a boarding house use.
Okay.
Any more questions on this page? And just to clarify, in the top left, where it talks in 17-12-020 and 17-15-020, the change was required by HB, not 1042, it's by HB 1998. It's a type on my part. Okay. Any further questions?
Any other questions for clarification? Okay, so we can go ahead and move on to the next piece then.
Yeah, so I have a motion here if this plan commission would like to pass the motion. Additionally, if in looking through the amendments, if you see any small non-policy changes, just grammar or formatting, feel free to send my way and we'll get those put in before the council does their final approval.
So do we have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the Planning Commission Resolution 2025-180, recommending that adoption by the City Council of amendments to Mill Creek Municipal Code to comply with the housing regulations in HB 1042, HB 1110, HB 1337, HB 1998, and SB 5258.
Second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and go for a vote. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the motion passes unanimously. And so our next subject is talking about our bylaws.
All right, so if you recall, we went over the bylaws last in the February meeting, and there were several changes requested. I gave those to the city clerk to implement, and I'm going to go over those changes now. So new updates in Article 2, Section 13, where it said that, previously said that separately, the city council shall appoint a council liaison, and appear that we're telling the city council what to do in the PC bylaws. We added that it's pursuant to the Mill Creek Governance Manual that a council liaison is being appointed. And then in Article 8, there is talk about what to do when there's a conflict of interest and if that prevents a quorum from being made. And the clerk consulted the, city clerk consulted the MRSC, the Municipal, oh, I'm not quite sure what it stands for actually. Municipal Research Something Center. It's a center for Washington cities to get legal guidance on. And they didn't find any examples in other bylaws, but they also said, feel free to do it. It's, you know, it's a, the idea is fine. So they rewrote the Article 8 to read as follows. Oh, it's the Municipal Research and Services Center. Thank you. Commissioner Schulte also sent me some questions just before the meeting about this section, which I would like to discuss if that's all right with you.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to pull up that email. One moment. Actually, it's right here. Okay. So she asked, if a person has a conflict, then they cannot vote on legislative or policymaking decisions with no exceptions. Only on quasi-judicial matters can an exception be made to meet quorum and majority vote. And what are some examples of those different kinds of decisions? I'll answer the second one first. So a quasi-judicial decision is one that involves specific application of regulations to a specific project proposal. So for instance, approving a conditional use permit would be a quasi-judicial decision, or approving a short plat or a final plat. The Planning Commission currently does not have any quasi-judicial responsibility. That's all reserved for the council currently. However, these bylaws are being rolled out to all the boards and commissions. So there are some boards that do have quasi-judicial decision-making, such as the Design Review Board. And so the way I am reading the section, it says, let me expand a little bit. So the appearance of fairness doctrine applies to quasi-judicial matters and not legislative or policymaking decisions. So the appearance of fairness doctrine only comes into play in a quasi-judicial situation. And so it would not currently impact the Planning Commission since there are no quasi-judicial decisions to make. So essentially, I don't think anyone would ever have a conflict of interest that requires them to recuse themselves.
Okay, so legislative or policymaking decision, which is the majority of what we do, we don't have to, there isn't a cause that we'd have a conflict to recuse ourselves.
Correct.
So for practicality purposes, as our committee is authorized to do decisions, this is kind of a moot point.
Yes.
But it would only be in there if our processes down the road would change such that we would handle quasi.
Exactly. And
Okay.
the process could change, and they wanted to keep the bylaws consistent across all the boards, so they left it in for other boards, commissions that do have that role.
Okay. I might suggest then to just add a language that clarifies that there is no conflict with legislative and policy-making decisions, just so if people are less familiar with the jargon terms, make it clear that if it's a legislative and policy decision, there's not a conflict.
Okay.
That's just, Because I think I misunderstood it, the opposite of that, so just wanted to.
I think that's reasonable. Is that something we would want to? Let me think. So is that something we would want to pass the resolution now? Well, trying to think. We don't want to pass the resolution without the final language, I would guess. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I mean, is there some other higher level standard that you could point that type of language to that you've referenced, that city planning commission has this type of responsibility? Design review board has this other one that is separate from our, what we maintain in this set of bylaws, just that higher level at the overall city level that could be applicable. Because I mean, other teams might have similar things. Instead of carving it out at each individual's bylaws, just have something at the higher level.
If I could also suggest, this could be the kind of thing that is just covered in training whenever you onboard new commissioners or new,
Yeah, it is
board
in
members
the
instead
training
of-
that we have to take.
right, instead of something that would be adopted as a law, it's just something that's just trained, right? And differentiating between a legislative responsibility versus a quasi judicial responsibility doesn't necessarily need to, if I could suggest, may not necessarily have to be spelled out in the bylaws, and could just be part of an orientation, or could just be part of our own internal processes to make that distinction.
Alternatively, perhaps if the planning commission wanted to pass a resolution adopting the amendments as amended and request that staff add that language clarifying which of these decisions the appearance of fairness doctrine applies to, without having to wordsmith it perfectly here. Would that be acceptable?
It would to me. I don't know how other people feel it. These conflicts are, I think, just an important thing to have very spelled out, to not create issues. And, my point last time was don't be more conservative than RCW, which I think this does. It's just some wordsmithing or clarification on those two concepts between quasi policy and legislative policymaking.
Mhm.
Just because you might get people less politically oriented that might not understand those terms as well when they read their bylaws that they're given.
Yeah, and even to me, when reading through it after your comments, I noticed the first paragraph, it's not clear reading it that conflict of interest doesn't apply, or only applies with quasi judicial. It's not clear. I'd be happy to add language that makes that clear.
Well, I guess if we want to try to move it on, we could go ahead and, adopt it as such and then say, he suggests as amended. And he can.
Or we can do an adoption and then we can amend pretty easily, just a quorum of the board and a majority vote amends our bylaws, right? So we could adopt them and then he could go make that clarification. We could hear just that piece as an amendment to our already just approved bylaws.
Yeah, and confirming there was something in the updated bylaws about amending the bylaws, right?
You're right.
Right, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I just had one more thing on the vacancies. So if someone is reason of death or disability, they really can't notify themselves. So like a person acting under power of attorney or receipt of a death certificate. I don't know how formal you want to get, but a member that's dead or disabled medically can't really inform.
So maybe clarify that when the city clerk should be notified immediately, that could also apply to just anyone who, like if staff knows.
Yeah, like a well, if you want a resignation in writing, if the member isn't able, you should be able to accept a power of attorney or like a death certificate as a form of notification.
But do we need that clarification in language here? I mean, it doesn't say that the person.
It does say the member shall tender the resignation in writing to the staff.
That's if they resign.
Resign, okay.
Is resign.
If a vacancy occurs by reason of death, resignation, disability, or otherwise, the city clerk shall be immediately notified. Doesn't say who shall notify the city clerk, so anyone could.
Yeah. Like how formal do you want the notification on? It's more so on a disability if someone thinks they're still capable.
But I mean, in disability, then if someone thinks they're capable, then we defer to the section on absences, right? If
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah,
disabled
yeah.
enough, I mean, we have. I think
Yeah,
that-
there's the
that
other
would
thing,
cover-
the
I think that would
absence of
cover-
the
that would-
recovered. I just don't know if we wanted to formalize what kind of documentation, notification, who has a right to notify on a quote unquote disability. Or
I mean, I
incapacity.
feel like if someone said that a person was disabled and they show up the very next meeting, being able to attend, we'd probably be able to figure something out there. I'm not sure. We'd hopefully won't have to run into that situation. I personally be in favor of not having to make any modifications to this
Okay.
language.
So do we want to try to modify this? No. Okay. Okay. So are we comfortable to move forward then? Okay,
Motion to adopt resolution 2025-181, rescinding resolutions 5, 6, and 7, and adopting the new bylaws.
I'd like to second that motion.
okay, motion that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing nobody for discussion, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion. Those in favor of adopting the resolution as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Done. So we have unanimous decision to adopt the new bylaws or modified bylaws.
Great, yeah, so I'll bring back some language changes next time for us to adopt to clarify that section we talked about previously.
Okay. Can we pop the agenda back up again?
Yes, let me switch over. Yeah, it is, I think the last thing is the good of the order.
I think you're right, but my memory's not too good.
Okay. Yes, it's just the good of the order.
Okay, so is there anything for the good of the order?
Yes.
Jeff?
Or do you have anything? You have some, all right, I do have some quick things I would like to bring about. First, is that there were a bunch of bills that were approved by the Senate that are pertinent to this body. The ones that we frequently discussed maybe a little bit is HB 1491, the TOD bill that has cleared the Senate chamber. And so that will need to be implemented by, I believe, 2029. So we have a little bit of time to figure out how to work that one. Also approved was parking reform bill, SB 5184. This one is notable because it exempts cities below a population of 30,000. So we're in the clear on implementing that state action. And then the other one that is probably more immediately going to require the city's attention is the lot splitting bill, HB 1096, which has implementation of 2 years after this date. So by 2027, we'll need to have that one implemented. There are a bunch of other ones that are probably maybe important that we haven't really done a deep dive on, but just wanted to bring these updates to you.
Could you explain what the last one you said was?
The lot splitting bill,
Oh, lot splitting. Okay, thank you.
it's just allows more flexibility in splitting lots and things
Okay.
along those lines. But again, there's probably some other hidden ones that maybe we weren't assessing, but I just wanted to bring this to this body's attention. Thank you.
Okay.
What was
Anything
the
else?
first one you said?
The TOD,
Yeah.
1491.
Okay.
That's the one that if you are within a half mile of a light rail or major transit stop or a quarter mile of a rapid transit stop, cities are required to allow higher density developments and have restrictions on parking. There's some specificities associated with that one that may or may not apply to the city. Again, we'll worry about the deep dive on that, but that's kind of the quick Sparks notes on that one, is that it's allows higher density near major transit.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? So we want to move for adjournment then?
Oh, I have one more thing.
Oh, okay,
2 members have decided not to, their terms are expiring, and they've decided not to continue. And so the clerk is currently advertising for vacancies. If you know anyone who'd like to serve on the planning commission, feel free to let them know and apply.
and when do those terms run out?
May 31st.
May 31st. Okay,
The correction, I think that's actually April 30th that they run out. At least what I remember when I was looking at the planning commission. So I think this would have been the last meeting.
I'm looking at the code right now. It's May 31st. I think there's a deadline to reapply that was before the term ran out. I think they said the April 15th was the term. Oh, well, I will take a look and update that if it's not accurate. Thanks.
Speaking of the planning commission website, I noticed that there's like meetings that like end in 2022 on there.
Mhm.
Are we able to like get rid of those or put them somewhere else, like in the public portal or something like that?
Yeah, so all the old meetings at some point will all be moved onto that portal we use now. And then the whole city website is being updated in a month or two. And so everything's gonna be changed at that point.
Great, thank you.
and so can we find out which 2 members aren't reapplying? Are they,
Oh, yes.
are they absent this evening?
Yeah, the members not here today, Abrams and Nolan.
Okay,
So we will also need to elect a new, so in June, we'll need to elect a new chair as well.
okay. Okay. So, any other business for the second time? Okay, so we had a motion that was moved and seconded to adjourn. So we had no discussion, so those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you for your time. And will we probably have a meeting in May? Going to be enough agenda items?